Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. In this video we'll be talking about baroreceptor reflex. This reflex is very important when we talk about exam point of view. This is most common question in exam when come to CVS. So what is baroreceptor reflex? Basically what happens is whenever there are increase in blood pressure, there are some receptor in our body which can sense that high BP, right? And what are those sensors? Baroreceptors. Those are receptors for pressure, okay? But instead, they are not real pressure receptor. Instead, they can sense stretch. So those are stretch receptors. Stretch sensitive channels are there which open up whenever there is stretch involved. Okay, so these baroreceptors are present in two locations, aortic arch and carotid sinus. So the names of baroreceptors are based on these locations, that is carotid sinus baroreceptors and aortic arch baroreceptors. So whenever we talk about reflex, mind it, you have to always first thing there are some components of every reflex which you have to answer. Like any reflex you come in, you face any reflex in exam. So what you have to do is you have to tell first what is the sensor or receptor present, then what are the afferent nerve ending, then the coordinating center, then efferent nerve ending, and finally effector, which is ultimately going to change. Okay, so here the stimulus is high BP, the sensor is baroreceptors. Okay, now let's talk about further components. So from baroreceptors there will be afferent nerve endings which will carry that signal to some higher center. So those afferent nerve endings are the 9th and 10th cranial nerve. Okay, so these are fixed. Okay, from carotid sinus, 9th cranial nerve will carry the signal to higher center, and aortic arch there is 10th nerve, vagus nerve. Okay, now from these two locations, the 9th and 10th cranial nerve, the afferent nerve endings, they carry the signal to medulla. Okay, if we talk about, this is cerebrum, this is midbrain, then pons, then medulla. So this is medulla, which we want to see what happens next. Okay, there is a center which is NTS, that is nucleus tractus solitarius in medulla, okay, which is the common relay center when we talk about any cardiovascular reflex. So every time the signal will come here, this is the relay center. So what happens next? There was high BP and these afferent nerve endings fire up and this signal comes to NTS. Okay, from NTS basically there are two limbs. One is the sympathetic limb, one is the parasympathetic limb. Parasympathetic limb is CVLM or cardiovagal center, and sympathetic limb is RVLM or vasomotor center. So these are the respective nucleus from where respective nerves emerge. Okay, so which system should be activated? You don't have to mug up here, just try to understand. Whenever there is high BP, if for example, if you suppose that sympathetic nervous system is activated, in that scenario what should happen? Sympathetic nervous system, what it does to our body, it increases the heart rate, increases the blood pressure, vasoconstriction occur. So ultimately it will increase further. So this is not possible that this system should be activated. So whenever there is high BP, this system should be inhibited. So what happens? Basically there is activation of the next limb, that is parasympathetic limb. Okay, so whenever there is NTS firing, there is always stimulation of CVLM, and whenever CVLM is stimulated, it has some GABA fibers which are emerging from here to RVLM. That means whenever CVLM is stimulated, always this center is inhibited, RVLM. So whenever parasympathetic is stimulated, this inhibit the sympathetic one. So cardiovagal center is ultimately stimulated. Okay, which lead to via efferent nerve ending of vagus, there is reduction in heart rate and vasodilation occur and ultimately decrease in blood pressure. So what has happened? There was increase in BP and there was parasympathetic stimulation was activated and then there is ultimately decrease in blood pressure. So that is reflex, right? So mind it, every time when you get any reflex, you have to tell this thing: receptor, afferent nerve ending, coordinating center, efferent and effector. Here effector are the heart, which decreases the heart rate, so on SA node, and vasodilation mean vessels. So vessels and heart are effector here, and ultimately response is reduction in blood pressure. I hope the point is clear to you, the concept is clear. If you have any query, you can comment below. Most welcome for every query. Thank you so much for watching. Bye bye. Happy learning.